Brian Wilson, Mary Catherine Ham, Brian Neiman, today's newsmakers, and you, the Morning Majority. 105.9 FM. AM 630. WMAL.
7:07 on the Morning Majority, and as I said before in the news, you know, a lot of the big names, the newsmakers in this town, they come to our broadcast, and we're always very happy to have them so we can share what's on their mind with members of the Morning Majority, and that is certainly true with our next guest, REINCE Priebus, the chairman of the RNC, the Republican National Committee. He is the top dog at the grand old party, and we're glad to have you with us. I have a couple of questions, sir.
Hey, good morning to you. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's always a pleasure. And now here's my first question.
You bet.
We look at the polls, and everybody, you know, the sort of the conventional wisdom is that the Republicans are really going to have to screw it up to not win the presidency back and do very well in the House and Senate. And yet, when I look at the poll numbers, I still see polls that suggest that Obama has relative strength out there. I mean, he's still looking good in a lot of the polls, and even in matchups among the top leaders in the presidential race, he often wins in those matchups. Are you at all concerned, or do you think that will shake itself out over time?
Well, I'm not. I guess I would kind of quarrel a little bit with the premise of the question. I actually think the polling looks very good for us, and if you look at most polling, even head-to-head nationally, we've got 3 or 4 candidates that are either right in the margin of error or ahead of Barack Obama, and the rest of the field is within very close reach of the president. And when you kind of peel back the onion here a little bit, our candidates are campaigning almost exclusively in Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina.
Right.
And the president's all over the country. And
that's a fair point.
For 3 years, and for our candidates to be within the margin or a little bit ahead of the president nationally, I don't know. I guess I kind of look at that completely differently, and I'm feeling pretty optimistic about our chances of beating this president right now.
And the other argument, I guess, is that once we actually get a nominee and the party can coalesce around that nominee, those numbers will sort of strengthen.
Well, yeah, they'll strengthen, but if I'm the president and I see that we've got Republican candidates who have spent very little money outside of a few states that are a little bit ahead of me already, I think that's a pretty bad situation for the president. And so we're pretty excited over here about our opportunities in defeating Barack Obama, but most importantly for us, I mean, quite frankly, it isn't even about Republican Party anymore. This is about saving America, and I think the mission here is much different than, I guess, politics of the past. I think this is all about our country and how we sustain the very idea of America at a time that our debt and our deficits are eating away at the foundation of our country. And so I just look at this election a lot differently nowadays than I would, say, a decade ago.
Well, when you do look at the polling, folks are generally displeased with all of Congress and everyone from Washington and all that kind of stuff, and folks say, well, they're displeased with both parties. How do you sort of escape that from a Republican point of view, the displeasure with, you know, a pox on all your houses kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with the fact that people are frustrated with politics in general and frustrated with everybody, but I do believe that the fish rots at the head, and I do believe that when you look at that polling and you see that people are frustrated generally with, say, Republicans in Congress, well, I mean, there's really it's not sort of an identifiable target there, and I think that when you look at what people feel about this president and whether he's led this country through some difficult economic times, you'll see, and I know you know this, you'll see that the polling is completely in the ditch for this president. And I think that when it comes time to change courses in this country, people look at the president and they look at their own lives and they determine that they're not better off than they were 3 or 4 years ago. And quite frankly, the beauty of this race politically, and I think in all of any time in politics, and in life for that matter, or in business, when you can actually show what someone actually said and what has actually occurred, that's the best measure for, I think, changing course politically. And if you look at President Obama's words, I mean, he's the one himself that out of his own mouth said, look, if we're not better off 3 or 4 years from now, this is now 3 years ago, then I'm going to be a one-term president. And in fact, a few weeks ago, on George Stephanopoulos' show, the president said, look, I don't think people are better off today than they were three years ago. So we can level an economic case against this president. We don't even need to deal. We will have plenty of a political case to level against the president, but just on the economy, I just think that he's baking his own cake here.
Reince, we're talking with Reince Priebus, chairman of the RNC. I know you can't endorse, or you're not going to endorse one candidate over another, but I do want to ask you about the Herman Cain story. Do you think Politico has been fair to Herman Cain at this point?
Well, I mean, obviously they're pretty obsessed with it, and I think that Herman is dealing with it, and I think he's going to have to. And I'm not really going to be the referee on this thing, but there's always going to be issues that candidates have to deal with, and sometimes you never know what they're going to be, and I think he's effectively getting on television and telling his side of the story. I think he's going to probably do a little bit more of that today, and see where it goes.
He says that he believes that race is a component of this. Do you believe that race has anything to do with this story coming out and the attacks on him?
I have no idea.
Okay. Let me ask you about the process itself. A lot of people complain that these caucuses and the primaries are way too early. Is there anything in the future that can be done to change that, and do you think it can be done or should be done at the national level within the Republican Party?
Well, I mean, I think we have effectively dealt with, obviously you all know that we were almost going into December, and I think that we did effectively deal with that, and I think that Nevada was good in moving back to February 4th. I think it was actually better for Nevada, better for the country, and I agree with you that getting any earlier than we are now is I think, pretty dangerous territory for our country in picking a president, but we're talking about 4 weeks earlier than what it would have been under our new rule at the RNC. The caucus date of Iowa, I think, is the same this year as it was 4 years ago, and it's the same as it was pretty close to what it was 8 years ago. So I don't think the calendar is getting any earlier. In fact, I would probably tell you that when it comes to picking delegates, 80% of all the delegates that will be chosen for the Republican nominee will come after March 4th. So, and that might be a light estimate when it comes to my calculation here. So, it actually is getting pushed out later, not earlier. But you have one state in particular, Florida, that jumped into January, which created this little bit of an avalanche earlier. But for the most part, most delegates are being chosen after March 4th.
All right. Thank you, Reince Priebus, head of the RNC. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you much. I appreciate you having me.